Today, we dive into the shadowy corridors of power in Moscow to analyze a phenomenon that is changing the face of the Russian government: the drastic and unprecedented reinforcement of security measures surrounding Vladimir Putin. We are not just talking about more bodyguards on the streets, but a surveillance structure that consumes the privacy of ministers, advisors, and even the president's domestic staff. Is the Russian leader fearing a coup against his regime? Or is this the final manifestation of a paranoia that began with the invasion of Ukraine and has now turned against his own allies? Vladimir Putin is not sleeping soundly, and, by extension, those working just feet away from him have also lost their peace. In recent months, the Kremlin has implemented a package of security measures not seen since the darkest days of the Cold War under Stalin's regime. Reports indicate that the level of distrust has reached a breaking point. High-definition cameras have now been installed inside the private residences of cooks, photographers, drivers, and security personnel who serve the president directly. The objective is clear: to monitor every interaction, every visit, and every conversation outside of working hours. But digital surveillance is only the beginning. Internet-enabled phones have been banned for anyone in the inner circle. The use of encrypted messaging apps, once the standard tool of the Russian elite for backroom deals, is now viewed as evidence of treason. Additionally, there has been an explicit ban on the use of public transport for any palace employee, aiming to prevent contact with the general population and potential recruitment by foreign intelligence agencies. The most protected man in Russia is increasingly hidden in renovated bunkers. Far from the hustle and bustle of Moscow, living in a bubble of almost absolute isolation. This week, the scenario became even clearer with a report leaked by a European intelligence agency and obtained by Western news outlets. The document lays bare the sheer scale of the paranoia that has taken hold of the Kremlin. The conclusion is unsettling. Putin is not just afraid of Ukrainian missiles or CIA agents. He has developed an existential dread of the Russian elite itself, the so-called Siloviki and the oligarchs, who until now were the pillars of his power for 25 years. According to the document, since early March 2026, the government has been operating in a state of maximum internal security alert. The focus is on two threats that keep the president awake at night: the leak of strategic information regarding his health and location, and the execution of an internal coup attempt. Putin specifically fears being targeted by a suicide drone strike, launched not from the Ukrainian border, but from within Moscow's affluent neighborhoods operated by dissident members of the Russian political elite who want an end to the conflict and the sanctions. Russia's Federal Protective Service, the FSOTA, equivalent of the US Secret Service, but with the powers of a private army, has implemented a new and invasive layer of security. The FSO now controls the vehicles that transport even the kitchen staff. In certain regions of Moscow, telecommunications networks and GPS signals are periodically jammed or shut down without prior warning. This creates a technological blackout intended to blind any drone or remote listening device. But it also paralyzes life in the capital and heightens the feeling that the country is under informal martial law. To ensure that no one is conspiring, the FSB, the successor to the KGB, has redirected high-tech listening equipment, previously used exclusively for counterterrorism and organized crime investigations, to monitor the presidential office and the ministries. Ministers are now searched before meetings with the president, and physical contact with Putin has become practically non-existent. The report points out that the Russian leader spends entire weeks in luxury bunkers, true underground cities located hours away from Moscow. Meanwhile, Russian state television plays its theatrical role, broadcasting pre-produced recordings of his activities to simulate that he is still maintaining an intense public schedule in the capital. This is the canned footage technique, used to maintain the illusion of presence while the leader is protected by meters of reinforced concrete and S-400 anti-aircraft systems dedicated exclusively to his personal protection. To understand the gravity of this situation, we need to look at the trail of blood left in recent months. On December 22nd of last year, Lieutenant General Fanil Serverov, head of the Operational Training Directorate of the General Staff, was killed in broad daylight in Moscow. A magnetic bomb placed under his armored vehicle was detonated, sending a clear message: no one is safe. Serverov was a key player in the logistics of the war in Ukraine. He was the third high-ranking general assassinated in the heart of Russia in just over a year. Moscow, which was supposed to be an impregnable fortress, has become a hunting ground for resistance groups or infiltrated agents. This sequence of deaths has sparked a silent civil war between the FSO, the FSB, and military intelligence group. Each agency blames the other for the security failure within the high command. As a result, Putin forced a protocol review that requires the FSO to extend maximum protection to 10 more high-ranking generals, including the head of military intelligence. It is a humiliating admission that the state can no longer protect its own commanders against the internal enemy. And here we reach the most sensitive political point: the Sergei Shoigu factor. The former defense minister and current secretary of the Security Council, Shoigu was, for decades, Putin's most loyal ally. However, the report cites his name as a possible center of gravity for destabilization. While there is no evidence of an active conspiracy on his part, the arrest of Ruslan Solakova's right-hand man in March 2026 on corruption charges is seen by analysts as a warning shot. Putin is cutting off Shoigu's hands to ensure he cannot move the military chess pieces against the Kremlin. The memory of Yevgeny Prigozhin and his march with the Wagner Group in 2023 still haunts the corridors of the palace. Putin has learned that loyalty in Russia is an asset that expires quickly when the economy collapses and military victories vanish. The symbolism of this crisis reached its peak on Victory Day, May 9, 2026. For the first time in decades, the parade in Red Square was a shadow of its former self. No T-1 for Armata tanks, no intercontinental ballistic missiles, and no members of the State Duma in attendance. The parade consisted only of foot infantry. The official excuse was security against Ukrainian drones. But the true motive was the fear of gathering the elite in one place. Fewer generals and fewer politicians mean fewer uncontrollable variables and fewer opportunities for a coordinated move for deposition. All this occurs while the Russian economy enters a downward spiral. The GDP shrank by 1.5% in the first quarter of 2026, and the government was forced to raise VAT to 22% to finance a war machine that consumes more than 30% of the national budget. The population, which once accepted the war in exchange for stability, now feels the weight of inflation and new taxes on electronics. On the battlefield, the situation is equally grim. In April 2026, Russia recorded its first net loss of territory in 2 years. The momentum of Russian troops has been stalled by a technologically superior Ukraine, backed by a Europe that has finally mobilized its industrial base. The feeling in Moscow today is one of exhaustion. It has been for years of conflict, a period longer than the Great Patriotic War was for the Soviets. Russia has sacrificed hundreds of thousands of men and its global reputation, and yet it has still failed to control even the Donetsk region. The current scenario is that of an isolated czar, distrustful of his generals, monitoring his cooks, and governing through computer screens from within a luxury bunker. The conclusion for Vladimir Putin is a bitter one. The system he shaped over a quarter of a century, based on the fear he instilled in others, has now inverted. For the first time, the fear is rising from the bottom up, emanating from the very structures that were supposed to protect him. When a leader begins to treat his allies as suspects and his capital as enemy territory, history teaches us that the end of the regime usually comes not from an external invasion, but from an internal implosion. The czars alone, and in the power game at the Kremlin, loneliness is usually the prelude to the fall. If you found this analysis important for understanding today's geopolitics, don't forget to leave a like. It helps the channel immensely to continue bringing detailed and exclusive information. If you're not yet a subscriber, join us now and hit the notification bell to follow every development in this conflict that is changing the world. Until next time.